Hello and welcome to the first episode of season 10 of the Tigers Down Under. It's kind of crazy to think it's been that long, but welcome along all the same. We've got a new boy along with us this season, so I'll start with him first. Welcome to the podcast, Dylan.
Cheers. Thanks for having us on.
No problem at all. And we've also got Mike back for another season of optimism and cheerfulness, as always, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, I am. I am the greatest optimist in this group.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, might start with you, Dill, before we jump into what has been an interesting preseason, to say the least. But just wanted to get a sense of, I guess, your background in supporting City. What got you supporting the club, and yeah, what you love about City.
So I started following City probably, I think it was 2020, 2021 season, or I think it might have been when they won League One. And I think it was around when Ajun came in, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind since then. So yeah, that's probably the most enjoyable part.
Yeah, nice one. And I think we're sort of talking before the podcast, but I suppose having that Australian in the team certainly helps get a bit of Australian interest. And it's easy to sort of, I guess, dismiss or underplay the impact that having a player from your country can have on actually getting people from that country supporting a club. Like it's a massive thing. Like for myself, it was Richard Garcia back in the day, but for you, I guess Callum Elder in the team as well was probably a bit of an appeal.
Yeah, Cal and Elder there. And there's been a few other over the years, hasn't there?
Yeah, Jackson Irvine along the way as well. And it's a shame, actually, we missed out on, it sounds like we've missed out on getting Alex Robertson. It would have been nice to get another Aussie back to the club. But fingers crossed we can find a way. I mean, Portsmouth seem to be just signing all the Australians, so it'd be nice if we followed their lead. But maybe that's a good segue into talking about signings or lack thereof so far. It's been an interesting window. Maybe I'll start with you, Mike. Your sense, I guess we've had a lot of departures. We've had Jacob Greaves, Jaden Philogene, probably the two that we most expected. Then we've had the less expected departure in Ozen Tufan. Ryan Alsop, I guess, was probably one that a lot of people wanted and I guess aren't too unhappy to see depart. All the loanees going back to their parent clubs as well. And we've only seen, to this point in time, Cody Drame, Marvin Mellum, and I guess Ryan Giles signing on a permanent deal from after his loan spell. Strong suggestions, strong reports that Finley Burns will be joining today as well, but at this stage it's just the three. What have you made of the transfer activity or lack thereof so far?
Yeah, I think there were also talks of Giles not even being here by the end of the window. I think there were talks of him going to Middlesbrough. So hopefully we can keep him. I'm not going to shy away from it. I think we had expectations going into the season. You know, we finished 7th last season. We assumed, obviously, all the loan signings were going to leave, but I think at the time, Rosie had a really good relationship with some of them, so we'd expected maybe they would stay on. Obviously, our hopes got crushed 3 days later, so I'm not stoked, and I think we're in a lot of trouble.
It's kind of crazy. Sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, it's kind of crazy when you do think back to before the end of the season, we had genuine hope that we could sign someone like a Liam Delap on a permanent deal, and that's so far from where we find ourselves now.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy when you look at Ipswich, who are clearly trying to be like us. We had a winning recipe last season, and it was all there. All the building blocks were there. The right players were there. The right manager was there. And if Ipswich has recognised that, why haven't we? Why didn't we? I think a lot of us, and we're not going to go into the whole saga of why did we get rid of him, but I think it's still rocking the club. I think there's still players that maybe haven't necessarily bought into the Walter style of play or aren't confident, and especially with rumours coming out of Achun selling the club, it just doesn't seem like a really positive environment around the club at the moment. I think there's obviously like the social media posts and everyone seemed really happy in Turkey. I guess that was the first experience of them all being together, but you can't shy away from it. Like, we haven't won a game in preseason. And that's like, you look at some of the other teams in the championship that are off beating clubs like top tier in France and Spain and even in the Prem. Like, Wrexham have freaking beaten a Prem team and they've drawn to another. It's insane. So to only have made 2 signings and potentially 3 after this comes out is pretty worrying given the season starts in less than a week.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Ajun doing a Q&A with the supporters in about 2 hours, 2.5 hours time.
Yeah.
So there could be a bit of this podcast that's out of date by then. But yeah, Dill, I guess it's an interesting way to have found ourselves at the end of pre-season. I suppose the frustration as well is the fact that even if we do have a flurry of activity and incomings, that we've not really been able to give them a pre-season playing the Tim Volter style of football, whether their fitness bases are up to it for the championship to throw them straight in. I mean, what have you made of, I suppose, the lack of activity so far?
Well, yeah, it's just been a bit lackluster compared to obviously last season when we got all these star signings on loan and permanent, and then this one coming in. We're leaving it pretty late, obviously, for pretty much everyone to get up to scratch to what Tim wants to play, or how Tim wants to play. And I'm not sure what that means for the other coaching staff as well. Like, have they had enough time to sort of merge with these new players that will hopefully be coming in, and how they'll sort of play in that as well?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We'll talk specifically about the Bristol City game a bit later in the episode. But for now, I mean, I guess we've got a few players potentially coming in maybe before the start of the season. There's these rumours around Charlie Hughes at Wigan that don't go away. I mean, Finley Burns is an interesting one who has played centre mid or centre back for Stevenage last season. Maybe I almost wonder if that's us trying to say to Wigan, hey, if you don't want to play ball on Hughes, we'll just get this guy instead. We won't need to sign Hughes, but I'm sort of still hopeful that Hughes comes. And then, there's reports that Zimbardo's flying across from Ecuador at the moment. I think, to be honest, I think that one seems pretty likely, because I think the player himself has basically said that unless he's signing for some other English club, which could still happen given a bit of our track record with Kiefer Moore and Thomas Asante. And then Baz seems pretty confident in Liam Miller happening as well, as a right winger. Would be a really good one to get in as well. So there's a few kind of concrete names there, but certainly would want to speed the business up. Mike?
Yeah, I've got a feeling that the Finley Burns saga has come out, because I don't think we're going to get Charlie Hughes. I think we've pivoted into a loan rather than forking out 4 to 5 mil, and I really want to steer clear of the rumors that, like I mentioned, of selling the club. But it seems like if we're not spending the money on players, that's probably feeding into it. So if we're now moving away from necessarily looking at buying players and just loaning them, like Zimbardo is a loan, although I think we'd mentioned that there's a potential drug ban hanging over here, which is terrifying. Why are we bringing that in?
To be fair, when you do read about it, like, it sounds as if he's basically taken a shot of medicine from a club doctor, I think from a club doctor, not necessarily knowing what was in it. So there seems to be a bit of context around that. And that's why I think getting him on loan probably makes the most sense.
Yeah. The Liam Miller one is probably the one I'm most excited by, but I think there are too many clubs linked for us to actually be confident about that happening. But even then, like, you look at it, there's 2 signings, a potential third, and only 3 rumors, which is still only 6 signings. And I'm very likely that those 3 probably aren't going to get done before the first game of the season. So I did be really hopeful about.
Yeah, I did see Tommy Conway as another one being linked as someone we've made a bid for from Bristol City. Seems as if the money that we'd allocated for Kiefer Moore, that we then tried to use on Thomas Asante, we're now using on Tommy Conway potentially. But it does, until we land one of those players, it does feel a little bit like, I don't know if you remember back in the day under the Allams, Mike, we would sometimes make these supposedly big money bids on players, but never realistically going to get them. And it was almost their way of being like, hey, look, we're trying, we're spending all this money, and then not actually having to spend it. So unless we do get like a Charlie Hughes or a Conway, I'm a little bit skeptical about these fees.
It seems like it's all for show. It seems like it's all for show at the moment. I think, especially going into this press conference in 2 hours. Good morning, Ant. it seems to be hey guys, don't worry, like I'm putting money towards these players, like everything's looking good. It's like, great, we've seen this before, and it's not going to come to anything. We're going to have our depth at the moment is probably the thing that scares me the most. I mean, look, I have faith in our under-21s, but you can't rely on an under-21s team in the championship.
The cynic in me is also like the timing of this Finley Burns news is very convenient with the Q&A, that it's almost like that Ajun can go to this Q&A and go, guys, what are you worrying about? Like, we're getting these signings, we're getting them done. Look, there's this guy that's just coming in overnight, and Oscar's coming in from Ecuador tomorrow, and like, it'll be fine. Like, it does seem very convenient timing, but hey, if that's what it takes to kick us into gear, so be it. Cam in the chat saying, no, we haven't really signed anyone so far, but Style Volta was hired to replace Rosie for, hasn't reared its head yet. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Like Dill, you were saying, like, that's, I guess, the concern is that even if we get these players in, it's going to take a while for the coaches to actually get them playing the right style, get it working, which could be, a month, 6 weeks into the season. And we only missed the playoffs by a win last season. You think you can't just throw games away in the hope that we get this style up to speed.
And it sort of felt like that in, I guess, the last couple of seasons. There's been that moments of, okay, well, we just got to get through a few games, find our style of play. And it worked out for Liam, I guess, towards the middle, towards the end there as well. Finishing 7th is amazing, but now it feels like we've worked so hard for all this just to fall over and start again.
It's a good call out. It's a good call out from Ant as well. Like, the players that Walter would need to actually make this style of play work haven't necessarily been available to him. And I don't know what's going on, because it seems like if you brought in a new manager with a different playing style to what Rosie had, you would do everything in your power to bring in the players that will fit that style. And it's either someone's being too selective, or we're actually just not fully committing to finding these players. It just seems like there's something going on that we're not across.
Yeah, Baz on the 1904 podcast overnight, reading between the lines of what he was saying, it's almost as if Ajun's basically said, look, I trust you guys at the club to get things done, and they're not getting it done. And so I do wonder if today maybe it's more about saying, look, I'm stepping back. He's got his hands full with Fenerbahce, but that he needs the right people in place to do, sort of run the club on a day-to-day basis. And maybe it's a case that we've sort of gone, we got Carvalho and stuff in last season. Let's go for these superstars. And then we're finding that actually we need to shop a little bit cheaper. And we're now clicking into gear, which is, sort of better late than never. But, you look at like a Finley Burns and you go, well, he didn't go on the Man City preseason tour. It's not like he's been away. It's not like the Euros have held that up or anything like that. We should have had him in before we went to Turkey, so that by now we're going, look, he's played 3-4 preseason games. He's, up to speed. We know where he fits in. We're happy to have him start against Bristol City. Now it's like, well, we're chucking like a 21-year-old potentially in from the start against Bristol City, not even knowing how he fits the team. So, look, it's a tricky one. I don't know if we wanted to touch on the preseason games. We sort of already talked about them a little bit. Results don't really matter over preseason, but for an all-out attack, sort of heart attack style football, as I think Valter's described it, to only score the 4 goals, 2 draws, 4 losses. Dill, I don't know, like, I think you mentioned that you'd seen a few of the highlights. Anything, and I think Cam said before that we haven't really seen this crazy attractive style of football so much. I think we've seen it in sort of starts and stops in some of the games. Anything from preseason that's inspired you so far?
It's always good seeing Longman get to the back of the net. Love seeing him play. But I guess the winger situation was the biggest concern for myself. Look, what did we have? We had a draw, and then Fenerbahce was like 5-1. Not that matters, but then Doncaster 4-0. It's I don't know. Based off the highlights that I saw, it didn't seem like Pandor was that confident in front of goal, and that can change. But it's maybe do we know when Harvey Cartwright will come good, or is there any talk of
him and Lotitala both? Ant's comment, I smiled when you praised Longman, because I had the exact same thought. Nathaniel, who's on the To Hull and Back podcast, absolutely loves Longman as well. So he would have just sat up like a start saying, well, Someone's praising Longman.
It's a shame he's injured.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Longman, Irma, I don't know how bad their injuries are. Oscar as well.
Yeah.
Both injured for the first game. And I guess the concern being for that Reading game is that we basically played that first choice 11 and couldn't even score against Reading. And you think, sure, the result doesn't matter, but you sort of think we treat that like it's a real game.
Yeah.
And we lose 2-0.
Yeah.
Bit of a worry.
I'm going to break the fourth wall. In the run sheet, you said preseason games, and then put a term concerning with a question mark.
Yeah.
My only comment to that was no shit.
Yeah.
So it is concerning, but I think like the style of play it takes time. I mean, if you look at Rosie in his first season, I think half the season it was still just trying to build that up. It wasn't necessarily the best football. And like we talk about Panda having pretty poor games. I mean, this is the most he's played in a while. And I'm sure he's finding his feet, not only as the first choice keeper, but now also in this new style of play that he wouldn't have implemented previously. So I feel bad for him because a few of the goals were his fault, or positioning wise, or confidence. But at the end of the day, like as a team, you lose and win as a team, right? So we can't just pinpoint him as the problem.
And I am really crossing my fingers that we get to the real thing and the players flick a switch and go, it's the real thing now. We can't just concede those sorts of soft goals. But I don't know. Dil, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, backing like another element to it, I guess we saw under Rosie in his first season was we had a few players that were in his first team for a while there, and then they sort of got shifted out. And then he started seeing the players that actually wanted to play sort of his style of football sort of come through. And then the last season that sort of shone through a lot more. So, but I'm not sure how much depth we have for Tim to do the same. And obviously, keep the situation. We've got a couple of injuries, but yeah.
It's going to be tricky. Now, I'm conscious, Mike, that you have to jump in about 10 minutes, so I thought we'd rattle through some predictions. We can probably streamline it a little bit. I've pinched the ones that we did with the To Hull and Back boys on the weekend, but given the lack of signings and other things, we can probably skip a couple of them in the name of time. So I might start with you, Mike, first on who you've got tipped for Young Player of the Season.
I put Sincere Hall.
Nice one. Just for the fact that he's basically scored the majority of our goals in preseason.
And the only other striker we have at the moment is Oscar. And I feel like at the moment, if we need to rely on depth or if we ever decide to play two up front, he's the only option to play alongside Oscar, unless you put Longman up there.
And he gives me Bowen vibes. Like I said on the weekend, like it just reminds me so much of that Husky season. And it's a young gun who's going to get the opportunity and see what he does.
I thought that about Vaughan, and I was proven wrong. So we'll see. Vaughan might be another shout because he did look really good in moments last year. I think it was more of a confidence thing. So hopefully either he gets loaned out or he gets some game time, because I think the worst thing is for players like Hall and Vaughan to just stay in the 21s and not necessarily get first team action in like a League 2 or a League 1 team.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Dil?
For Young Player of the Season, what age does that stop?
Oh, yeah.
Like 23?
I think people on the weekend did include someone like a Longman in Young Player of the Season, so you could probably scrape him in. I'd say probably under 23, which I think he still qualifies for.
I was thinking Matty Jacob. Hopefully he comes good. I really liked the way he played when he could play last season, and I think if he gets more minutes, he'll sort of shine through. And that's in a defensive capacity.
Yeah, no, good shout. I'll probably skip most improved. It's probably a little bit similar. So maybe I'll go with like overall player of the season and start with you, Dil. Who do you think's in for a big season?
Well, since we're doing attacking football and it might take a while for us to get into that, I'll probably say either I've got three names here and I'll have to choose one, but I've got Coyle, Slater, or Jones. And I think Slater will hopefully shine through in any aspect. But otherwise, Jones, I think it might have been the 1904 podcast they were talking about. He's got a good, he's got a platform for him now to sort of step up to where Greaves was, and they're different players, but he might have a really good season. So, but I'll lock in Slater.
Slater, yeah, I think Slater's an interesting one because I love him as well. But you almost think like if we'd signed him for say £3 million from like a Premier League club, but the exact same player, I think he'd have such a different perception around him because he's just such a I think he sort of suffers from the fact that he's quite flexible in where he can play, and so he can fill in for a few different. It's almost like the old Irvine role where you just throw him wherever he's needed, and because he's not a standout attacking midfielder or a standout defensive midfielder, like people probably just don't kind of rate him as much as I think some of us do. But you see in some of those games last season, like against Southampton and Leicester, and I think Leeds as well, like in all those big games, he was actually one of our best on the pitch. So he's one that seems to elevate for the occasion, which is awesome to see. What about you, Mike?
I'm just going to touch on your most improved because I actually think it will be Longman. But player of the season, I actually had Jones.
Yeah, no, good shout. Just it's similar sort of logic that he'll step up with Greaves out of the side.
In the 20 minutes of which game it was that I watched, it was a lot of like passing between Panda and Jones looking for the right pass or the right movement upfield, and I think that's going to be his responsibility this year. And I think Greaves was very similar.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
I'll skip over top scorer because I think the real answer is probably someone that hasn't joined the club yet. And I'll ask you, starting with you, Mike. Do you think Walter will last the season? And that could be him being sacked, him walking, him being poached. Like there's a lot, just any scenario.
I don't think he'll walk, and I don't think he'll get poached. I do think he'll last the season. I don't, and unless I will stipulate, unless the club gets sold, then anything can happen.
It's going to be an interesting presser in 2 hours. I reckon.
Yeah. I do think he'll last the season. I think it's not like the Prem where it's you haven't won in 10 games, you're out. I think the expectations, and I also think the expectation from our fan base at the moment, given what's happened in preseason, isn't okay, you have to win your first 10. It's just show us that we're improving. Like, don't have any 4-0 defeats. If it's a 4-3, okay, at least we're playing attacking football. Like, I just want to see improvement. I don't necessarily need the results in the first few games. They would be nice. I mean, we look back at last season, and that 2-1 loss to Norwich on the first day of the season is realistically one of the reasons we didn't make playoffs. Albeit shit lino. But still, right? So I think he will.
Yeah, fair. Do you think also there's an aspect that Ajun's maybe a bit stubborn that he sacked Rossini and made the call, and so he probably doesn't want to admit that he was wrong on making that decision? I guess it could be.
I mean, earlier you mentioned he's going to like step back and he's got the right people in place to make the decisions for the club, but he made the decision to step in and make the change. And I think we called it very football manager-esque, and I think there are a lot of comments on Instagram and Twitter or X saying like he needs to realize this isn't football manager and he needs to let the club do what the club does. So it might be a stubbornness. I think he's just getting frustrated with lack of I guess, progress, or he's not having the same conversations he was having last year, right? Like last year he was talking to a lot of players and bringing them over. Like he was talking to the Turkish players, and it just seems like that's not happening this year. So maybe he's bored, maybe he's stubborn, maybe he doesn't really know where to put his time. I think owning 3 football clubs now, because I think he owns one in Ireland.
So he's gotten rid of the Irish club, and I don't even know if the Maribor club's actually been confirmed. But
okay, I just don't. Yeah, I don't know. We'll know in 2 hours.
Yeah. And do you reckon Volta will last the season?
I said that I had a note that said that if he can get on if we can win a few games before January, then he'll stay. But I'm starting to think now maybe if it's not looking good after January, I don't know, maybe Ajun will sort of see like, okay, well, we can't finish the season and then do the same thing that we just did with, a hectic preseason. So I don't know. I think if we're doing well, he stays, obviously. But Yeah, I don't know. I think if we're starting to look really bad, I think if we get some signings in January that sort of suit his playing style, then that might help. But even if he gets that and doesn't do well, then obviously he'll get the boot.
And I guess on that note, where do you have us finishing the season? What position?
What was that podcast said? 10th. We'll finish 10th. No, I don't know. It's a hard one because sort of from what I gather, a lot of different EFL fans talking about that. Like there's a bunch of different teams that might be going through something similar to us. But I think I'm leaning towards 18th.
Fair enough. And then Mike, if you're about to duck off, maybe you give us your finishing position before you do.
I had 20th.
Fair enough. That's surviving relegation. That's
it is
optimistic, isn't it?
For me, yes, incredibly optimistic. So I mean, look, it's one of the things I don't understand was the selection of matches in our preseason. I think we tried to put ourselves up against very high quality teams, and it showed that we're not there yet. Whereas if we had kind of our level or League One, it would have been very interesting to see how a team that isn't as pressing and as like put together, like why have we played Jose Mourinho's team? Like why have we done that? That especially with a new style of play and new kind of a new type of starting 11, it hasn't given them the most confidence, which I think was poor on the club's behalf. So I don't think it necessarily reflects how we'll finish. I'm just worried about the makeup of the team at the moment, and that's why I've got us finishing at 20th.
How early do we sort the preseason games? Because I'm wondering if maybe some of the thoughts were that we still had, well, we might be able to retain some players, and obviously Ejun's a media mogul. But
That's a good question, because I was going to make that point. Is I think I saw a comment that the Reading fixture was agreed upon with Rosenia, and that Volta didn't want to have to travel to Reading for that game, but honoured the commitment because it was already in place with the club. So it's a fair point that it would have been Rosenia maybe organising these friendlies, and maybe we thought we'd have players through the door a lot quicker, and that's why we did it. And then obviously Fenerbahce would have been organised because it's Ejun's other club in that sense, I guess. But look, I mean, like you're playing Newcastle at home, which is a great fixture on paper, but you're playing with half the under 23s playing. So it's kind of like, well, what's really the point? We could play like Scunthorpe or someone, and that's still that's a local club, giving them a bit of exposure, and it gives us a 10 that's probably a bit easier to work out style of play on. So
we're also against North Ferriby next time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that became an under 23s fixture, I think, but you could just bring that back as a first team game at this rate.
Why have we played Fiorentina? I mean, even though we've gotten a result, it just none of it makes sense to me. So maybe it was agreed with Rosie.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, look, we'll finish things off, and we'll chat Bristol City just briefly. And they've done a little bit of business in the window, but look, as you guys were saying, I mean, I think a lot of clubs are going through similar where they aren't doing a whole lot of business. Difference being, I suppose, that they already have a decent core of a squad in place, so they're not as in need of signings as we were. They've brought in Sinclair Armstrong from QPR, Fali Mayulu, I think is how you'd say that, from Rapid Vienna, and they've also brought in Yu Hirakawa from Machida Zelvia, and they're still at this point working on a deal to sign Scott Twine from Burnley, who, of course, we know pretty well. It's a very similar style of play to Rosenia under Liam Manning. So I think City supporters will at least have one side playing that sort of more ponderous, possession-heavy style of play at the MKM come the weekend. It'll certainly be very interesting to see how we go up against them in terms of just a contrast of styles. And like I sort of said, like you kind of have this hope in the back of your mind that you go, well, preseason's preseason, but maybe once the real thing kicks in and, we've got decent number of season ticket holders this season, so you think maybe the MKM will be pretty full, maybe with the atmosphere and the adrenaline and everything else, that maybe something clicks and the players do go out and put in a good display. But I guess with the injuries potentially to Longman and Oscar and Omer, depending on how bad they are, I just don't know where the goals necessarily come from. But you think back to that Leicester game, Mike, in 2016, 2017, where we beat them 2-1, where you think, we didn't give ourselves a chance in that one. Pull off the crazy win. Stranger things can happen. But I guess I'll start with you. I'll start with you, Mike. How are you feeling heading into this one?
Yeah, not good. I think if we hadn't had, I mean, obviously, I don't think we've gotten an update yet on being in the team. Seri just seems kind of missing in preseason. I don't really know. I did not say Seri. Sorry, my phone just went off. I just don't know what's going on. It just seems like there's a lack of motivation currently, and I think the losses definitely haven't helped, or the lack of results haven't helped. I don't even, like, you asked for a predicted lineup. I don't even know. I don't know how.
Hey, I'd say the biggest lineups. It's the easiest thing ever, right? It's just, well, who's our 11 fit players. So there's a reason the episode's called "Bring Your Boots." Just bring your boots.
It's everyone.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling like you'll see a lot of the under 21s on the bench, or if not starting. Like I'd actually love for Hall to get some time and Vaughan to come off the bench.
Yeah.
It seems like if we bring players in, it's a good time to let them have a good run around. I don't have any expectations for this game other than I don't want to lose more than 4-0. So my prediction is 4-0.
4-0. Yeah, okay. Dill, what are you thinking?
I don't know. It's an early fixture, isn't it? 9:30.
Yeah, 9:30 p.m. at least. So it's a nice palatable time for us. I think it's one of those weird ones. I think it's on Sky over in the UK, but I don't think it's on BN here. I think it's on Tigers Plus as far as I know, but we don't have any details of the Tigers Plus subscriptions as things stand. So guess we'll see.
Yeah, Tigers Plus hasn't had a good preseason either, which is probably in line with how things are going at the moment. I don't know. It's a hard one. So I don't know what Bristol City have been up to. I haven't looked into them just yet. I'm just starting to sort of turn the cogs on, I guess, this season as a whole in the championship. But I don't know. Hopefully we come away with at least a point. So I'll say 1-1.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm actually, I should have had a look at their preseason. They've actually had a pretty decent preseason because they drew with Wilhelm II, which I think is a Belgian club. They've beaten Exeter City, Cheltenham, Aldershot, and Newport. Now,
better than us.
Yeah, that's right. Like quality opposition aside, you're getting some consistency into the players. You're getting some goals into the squad, some confidence, some success breeding success. It could be a good case study in whether preseasons actually matter. If we go out and beat them on the weekend after they've gone with that set of results in preseason versus ours, maybe we go, hey, didn't matter at all. Look what happened. So could be an interesting one. Tommy Conway, if we're putting a bid in, maybe it's just a sneaky strategy to disrupt him and get him kicked out of the Bristol City squad for the weekend, and we don't end up signing him. I don't know, but or it could be like that Slutsky season. He does play, he scores against us, and then we sign him the next day, as we did with a few players then. Look, I think we'll probably lose. I'd love a 1-1. I think we'll probably lose. I think like a 1-0, 2-0 defeat is probably on the cards, and maybe it'll hasten a couple of signings in the attacking areas following that game. But it's going to be certainly an interesting couple of days in the lead up anyway. If we've got Zimbardo potentially coming in, Burns coming in, maybe you'd hope a striker coming in. Like you got to hope that there's a striker coming in at this stage to see what we can do before the weekend. But yeah, maybe we finish off. I'll get your thoughts for we've talked about where we think we'll finish the season, but how are you feeling heading into the season, Dylan? Like, are you excited? Are you just sort of trepidatious? Are you sort of at this point just sort of not checked out, but are you sort of just like, bring it on, see what happens? Like,
I don't know. It's part of the roller coaster, I guess. From when I started following, I don't have too high hopes for how things are going to go, but if I just hope we don't get to the end of it and hit the reset button again.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And Mike, I mean, we probably know your thoughts.
It's a weird one, right? Like I have no expectations for this season, as I said, other than not getting relegated. Even though I've been screaming in the group chat that let's prepare for League One. But I think it'll be nice to go into each game and wake up at stupid times and not expect to win. So anything other than that is an awesome way to spend the Sunday morning. So a draw or a win now becomes so much more valuable. Whereas last season, a lot of games that we drew, we'd get angry. We should have won. The games that we were losing against bottom half of the table, we were getting angry. Like I was getting angry. So it'd be nice not to have that anger this year, because all I expect us to do is lose every game. So it'll be nice to be proven wrong. Let's put it that way.
No,
I think it would feel better if something wasn't working last season and then we used this season. It's like, all right, just tear everything down, we'll start again. But I guess the bitter taste in my mouth is doing quite well last season and then coming into this sort of still hitting the reset button. But yeah, much like you, if we're expecting to lose a lot of the fixtures, anything more is a bonus.
Yeah, well, and again, it does remind me of that Premier League season where we had the very threadbare squad, beat Leicester on the opening day, beat Swansea the game after, and you kind of go, geez, it's all sort of that unexpected positive. But I think you're right. Like, I think for me, the thing is that when we sacked Rossini, I went, okay, well, we're aiming high. We're aiming for the, almost the automatic spots, or at least the playoff spots. For us to now be coming in going, look, top half would be a positive finish. It just feels like it's a bit of a disappointment to be at this point. As we said at the start of the episode, like we thought we could get someone like a Liam Delap on a permanent at the start of the window, and our expectations have sort of drastically adjusted from that point. Whether that was, reasonable or not to think we could do that, I think the club sort of talked about it. So clearly there was some sort of hope. But yeah,
I think there's the adage of you have to take a step back, like one step back, 2 steps forward, right? But it just feels like we've taken 15 steps back and we're not taking any steps forward.
It was, especially with Rosie going, it was like, oh wow, we must be really kicking into gear for something big, and then it's kind of
I was expecting like a Jose to come in and take us straight to the Prem, but everything about this preseason has surprised me.
Look, this is such a good promo for this season. Like, we want people tuning in every week because this is such a.
I promise I'll get more positive.
Yeah.
But I want reasons to get there, right? Like, I want to be proven wrong, and I want to actually get excited about this league. And look, we might come out this weekend and win 4 or 5-0, right? And then my attitude completely changes next podcast.
You're so fickle. You're
I'm just saying.
Well, that's it. And look, as I was saying, I think somewhere else, I think if nothing else, we should be in for a pretty fun deadline day, because I think we'll be doing a bit of business no matter what, which is always a bit of fun. And, as I said, like, we're fickle supporters, give us a couple of signings and our mood will change and we'll be going for the title before you know it. So, look, it's going to be a crazy season. It's more unpredictable than last season, at least I would say that. So absolutely encourage everyone to keep tuning in every week to listen to us chat about all things City. But a massive thanks to you, Dill, for your first appearance. It was a really great one, and I'm sure we'll have you back sooner rather than later.
Cheers. Thank you.
No worries. And thanks as well for joining us, Mike.
As usual, all good.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. As always, we'll be back this time next week to review the first game of the season, hopefully some transfers as well, and what comes of this Q&A with Arjun today as well. So until then, come on, City.